Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is the penultimate entomology episode, the 9th one out of 10. And this time I'm going to be covering earwigs, lacewings, and I feel like I should cover a third one. Scorpion flies. That'd be a good one. Okay, so yeah, kind of a mixed bag this time around. Let's start with earwigs. Dermaptera, which means skin wing. If you look at earwigs, you can kind of see where that name comes from. Their wings, kind of like Hemiptera, are very leathery and not all that effective. There are flying earwigs, but the most commonly seen ones, they have just these short, I would say vestigial wings. They're similar actually if you look at them in terms of structure, shape, and overall texture. They're really similar to cricket wings, the more flightless varieties. And in terms of the mouth parts, they're polyphagous, so they got the chewing mouth parts very similar to Orthoptera. And then the most notable thing about them, the reason why people are interested in them, either because they're scared of them or they're just kind of like, well, what is that, is the peculiar cerci they have. As I've mentioned in a previous episode, some insects have cerci. And all cerci are little sensory organs that are on the very end of the abdomen. They're kind of like the yin to the antennae's yang or whatever. And some of them have relatively small, almost useless, almost vestigial cerci, like grasshoppers in Orthoptera. And then others have much more useful cerci. And a great example within the same order, within Orthoptera, crickets. They have those interesting little prongs on either end of their abdomen. Roaches have cerci. Just a lot of them have that organ, and nowhere will you see it. I'm not going to delve into it too much. I might say that for the next episode, because no more will you see more interesting examples of this than in springtails, but I'm not going to get into springtails today. That's how they spring, though. But earwigs went in a very interesting direction. They turned them into these massive, offensive-looking prongs, very similar to the mandibles of a stag beetle, and they're very useful in both defense as well as the males actually fight with each other. And females actually prefer males with asymmetrical eyes. In one of my questionnaire episodes, I mentioned that symmetry is important with regard to attraction. This is a funny case where asymmetry is actually advantageous because it allows them to sort of pinch a little better and sort of tug of war a little better with the males, because that's how they compete with one another for mates. So females are actually drawn to kind of where one overlaps a little bit. It's kind of interesting. Also, some earwigs are oviviparous. And in a previous questionnaire episode, I mentioned that the difference between viviparous, oviviparous, and oviparous. Oviparous means you lay eggs. Oviviparous means you have eggs internally, but then they hatch internally and are given live birth. And then viviparous means giving live birth the way humans do. Earwigs also exemplify parental behavior in that they watch over their young, particularly the mothers, to take care of them and protect them. And another reason I wanted to kind of cover them is not just because they look cool, but because the overall myths surrounding earwigs. People really don't like earwigs. The big one is they'll crawl in your ear and lay eggs. No, they will not. Period. No animal has ever adapted such a crazy strategy to crawl in one of the most texturally sensitive parts of the most intelligent species on Earth's head. It wouldn't be a good strategy. You would go extinct pretty quickly. And also, the notion that an animal would need calories and resources exclusively from like an animal's brain like that. I mean, there are brain parasites, but not macroscopic big creatures that would rely on crawling in your head. That's crazy. It's a myth. It's an urban legend. It's like with the dragonflies sewing our mouths shut. I should have brought that one up the last time, but I forgot about it. So that's a myth. The other reason why people are concerned about earwigs is they think that they will hurt them with those little pincers. I mean, they can sort of defend themselves a little bit, but I've never heard of anyone getting hurt by an earwig, is where I'm going with that. So, relatively harmless, interesting animal. I don't see any reason why people dislike them as much as they do. This could be sort of the maligned animal episode, because now I'm going to go into Mycoptera, scorpion flies. Talk about a maligned animal. Most people have never seen one, first of all. And when they do, they freak out. And then when they hear the name, they freak out even more. And it's because, well, they're a little bit scary looking. They have a very dolichocephalic, that is to say, long face. They definitely have predatory mouth parts, and they are obligate predators. But what freaks people out, and where they get the name, is that the male has a tail that looks astonishingly similar to a scorpion's. And people see that, and they assume it's a stinger, and they freak out. Well, it's actually the genital capsule. So, it's his dick, guys. Well, a degus, whatever. That needs to be a new slang insult, by the way, calling somebody an adigus, because that's what that is. It's an insect's male genital area. Anyway, that's all it is. And one of the interesting things about scorpion flies, one of the things I find fascinating about them is insects are known for not being particularly intelligent. I've gone over insect intelligence numerous times. But they do engage in some behaviors that are surprising, including trickery. And this is something the males do. As part of their courtship process, the males are expected to give the females a gift. And, them being animals, it's not like she wants chocolate or flowers. They bring them something to eat in their obligate predators, so they bring them a freshly killed insect, right? Well, even though we think they all look the same, they have ways of gauging one another's appearance for what's more or less desirable. And male scorpion flies, if they're not having any luck with the more attractive ones, and they meet one that they're kind of settling for, sometimes, no joke, they will offer them like a scavenged, sometimes even already eaten and just worthless cadaver, like sometimes from a spider web, for example. They'll pull one out of a spider web and offer it to a less attractive female. She accepts it, they mate, then she goes to eat it and realizes that she's been duped. So it's just interesting to think that an animal with probably 9,000 neurons is capable of that. I mean, I realize that it's instinctive and it's not like a creative act, but it's still really interesting given the setup, It's like seeing somebody do calculus on one of those solar-powered calculators that you get free with a bank account. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that with that kind of hardware. Let's see. Was going to cover... that's right. Neuroptera. Lacewings. Another maligned animal. Here in the South, a lot of people will use an expression, crazier than a doodlebug. And growing up, I just thought it was gibberish. I was like, okay. But turns out doodlebugs are real. And turns out the term comes from Neuroptera, lacewings. Not the adults, though. People like the adults. When people see lacewings, they're generally either surprised at how pretty and unusual they are. They're like little emeralds with lace doilies for wings. Or they just like them because they're good for gardens. People like lacewings, generally speaking. I've never heard anybody complain about one. But baby lacewings, the larval form, I probably should have mentioned, scorpion flies undergo a complete metamorphosis. Their larvae is similar to a caterpillar, but not quite, and really hard to find photographs of. And Dermaptera undergo an incomplete metamorphosis. So the juveniles, they're just like little versions of the adults. Should have mentioned that earlier. Anyway, back to lacewings. Juvenile lacewings, the larvae, are antlions. And if you've ever played any JRPG in the past 20 years, you're probably familiar with antlions, even if you've never seen one. They're the big, scary Sarlacc from Star Wars things, with just a little conical pit in the ground, and then two massive jaws come up and start throwing sand everywhere. And the whole point of that is to knock ants down into that hole and eat them. What's really interesting about that behavior, for one, is the fact that it even evolved in the first place. It's extremely complex. I mean, they dig a little pit, The dimensions have to be perfect so that the surface area is just right to where an ant can't really get a foothold. Then they start pelting it with sand at amazing angles and trajectories, which is why, by the way, they're called doodlebugs, is they make these little doodles in the sand. And then also, once they transform, they go from a very, by human standards, a very ugly animal to the pretty lacewing. But lacewings, as I mentioned, are also obligate predators, and that's why people actually like lacewings. So I just think it's interesting that an animal could be that different from its adult larval phases. I mean, we've covered a lot of insects that are holometabolists. That caterpillars are very different from butterflies, but the contrast between an antlion and as I mentioned with dragonflies, larval dragonflies are scary and dragonflies are pretty, but there's just no comparison between an antlion and a lacewing. Surely it took a while before people even figured out that they were the same species. They're just very different. I think I'm going to cover one more. I've covered 3, and we're 11 minutes in, but just real quick, I'll cover fleas. Fleas, Aptera, are one of the only, maybe the only, I can't really think of any other examples, where an insect had wings, evolved wings, went to all the trouble of evolving wings, and lost them because it evolved to not have them, and it's because it was more advantageous, because again, this is an animal that lives on hair. And I'm probably going to skip over lice, because it could be a whole other episode, and I kind of want to have a nice round 10 episodes, but the mouth parts are sucking piercing, similar to lice. They are dependent on drinking blood, similar to lice. They undergo a full metamorphosis, which surprises a lot of people. They tend to think that a baby flea would probably just look like a grown flea, but they look very different. They look like dust bunnies, to be honest, which makes sense since they really are at home in carpet, which is actually, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, fleas and humans. As you already know, fleas are obligate parasites and that they feed on pets, warm-blooded pets, poikilothermic pets like dogs and cats. Well, what happens with people who have dogs or cats with fleas is they don't really notice that much until they go on vacation. The reason why is then they kennel the dog and the cat, right? Or, whatever pet they have that's warm-blooded that fleas like. The fleas that were on them have laid eggs in that carpet. Now the dog isn't in the house. And now there's no people in the house. And they're gone for a week. These little larvae, they grow up eating the detritus, the dust and whatnot in the environment, in the house. And they turn into adults. And there's no blood meal in the house. And so they sit and they wait. And there's still no blood in the house. They get hungrier and hungrier. And then the family comes home. They pick up the dogs from the kennel. They come home. They walk through the door. And now they're just mobbed with fleas. And now they're covered in flea bites. And I can't believe we have fleas. How did we have fleas? They'd had fleas. They'd had fleas a long time. It was just biting the dog and a cat, and they didn't notice. What had happened was when they walked through that door, all those fleas that had come into adulthood and had been starving while they were on a trip, a fresh blood meal just walked in the door, so they just mobbed those people. So I just find that interesting that that's a really common story that you hear, where people, I didn't know we had fleas. We got to get our dog and cat treated for fleas. We came back from vacation. You had fleas a while. The vacation just made you aware of it because you became the target menu item instead of your pet because they were desperate. Anyway, that's all I'm covering today. Like, share, subscribe. Keep asking questions. Bye.